And some people have what I think is the misguided idea that if you recollect these events, that you're somehow bringing up points of division. That if you talk too much about the past, you may resurface some of the wounds from the past. I disagree with that. I think that if you understand what happened in the 1960s, it was a triumph. It was a victory of going beyond race, and it was a celebration of our coming together as two communities, black and white in the South.
So the children left school to march through a park on their way to the lunch counters in downtown Birmingham. They were armed only with a dream.
This is Birmingham, the South's mightiest industrial city as the world knew it this week.
When I was growing up, my mother and my father and grandparents told us, don't get in the way. Don't get in the way. Don't get in trouble. And I said today, many of us as young people got in the way. We got in trouble, but it was good trouble.
For some reason, we think that 40 years ago was a long time. And we have to remind people that this was not such a long time ago that we were fighting these struggles.
This little light of mine, well, I'm gonna let it shine.
The pilgrimage meant many things to me. First, as a person who grew up in the segregated South in El Paso, Texas, I was reminded of where we had been, how far we have come, but yet how far we must go.
It was here in this city that the legal back of segregation was broken. Not with adults, not even with college students, but with junior and senior high students.
To realize that it was young people who led the struggle, and to be there in the park with young people is very powerful, because they all of a sudden realize that the future is on their shoulders, and they too have a responsibility to fight all of the injustices in our current times, and there are many.
It gives me an opportunity to put things in the proper perspective, because I can now look back and can talk to people about what they were thinking when they participated in all these things.
Today is a triumph for freedom.
That was a defining moment. We knew then that we had won a victory.
It opened up doors of opportunity for black people, but it also freed white people to act on their good conscience. And it's created this society and this politics that we enjoy now, where people are able to move beyond race and beyond identity.
We got in the way. And another generation must find a way to get in the way. I have a feeling today that in America we are too quiet. We need to make a little noise. We need to push. We need to pull until we can create the beloved community of truly interracial democracy in America. Let's keep walking. Let's keep moving.
Let the spirit of history be your guide.
We're gonna let it shine. Oh, we have a light of freedom. We're gonna
Good morning. I welcome you to the Emerging Leaders Town Hall. My name is Eric Butler. I am the Vice President and General Manager of Union Pacific Railroad, and it is certainly a privilege and an honor for us to host this forum, and we appreciate each and every one of you that are here with us today. For some of you, where Union Pacific may not be a household name, just allow me a few minutes to tell you a little bit about who we are. We are the largest freight transportation railroad in North America, with tracks and facilities going from Chicago to New Orleans and all points west to the Pacific Ocean. We have about 36,000 miles of track in 23 states and about 50,000 employees. We're excited that this year we're looking to have about $17 billion in revenue, and I have the privilege of running a business, a $3 billion business within that. I'm excited about this forum today, or this place today, because after having a career of being the first in a lot of different places in corporate America, I'm excited that we're on a transition, or at the point of a transition, where those emerging leaders that are coming on no longer have to be first in everything, but we can go beyond those of us that have been first and be leaders in all aspects of society, whether it's business, politics, religion, or et cetera. I appreciate Union Pacific's role in that and how we have promoted that and how they have allowed me, just a little kid from Brooklyn, New York, to rise to this point, and not only rise to this point in corporate America, but also be active in our community and be active in the passion of my heart, which is being a pastor also in addition to being a corporate leader, pastor in the Church of God in Christ. This time, I want to welcome all of the panelists to come and join us, and it is also my privilege to introduce our keynote speaker for today. Our keynote speaker is Congressman Benny Thompson. He is a member of the U.S. House of Representatives and the chairman of the Congressional Black Caucus Political Education and Leadership Institute. Congressman Thompson is currently serving his 8th term as a Democratic congressman for Mississippi's 2nd District and the 3rd term on the Homeland Security Committee. He is not only the first African-American chairman of the committee, but also the first Democrat. Congressman Thompson has spent his entire adult life giving a voice to the voiceless. With more than 40 years of continuous public service, he is the longest serving African-American elected official in the state of Mississippi. With 6 district offices, Bolton, Greenville, Greenwood, Jackson, Marks, and Mound Bayou, Congressman Thompson is committed to empowering those who gave him an opportunity to represent the 2nd District of Mississippi. Congressman Thompson has long been considered a leading voice on civil rights, equal education, and health care reform. Congressman Thompson has helped to make a real difference in the lives of his constituents. In 1975, he filed a lawsuit to increase funding at Mississippi's historically black universities. With Congressman Thompson as the lead plaintiff, the case was settled in 2004 for an unprecedented $503 million. In 2000, Congressman Thompson's legislation created the National Center for Minority Health and Healthcare Disparities became law. As chairman of Homeland Security, he now works diligently to increase diversity within the ranks of the Department of Homeland Security, as well as provide small minority business contracting opportunities within the agency. It is my privilege and my honor to welcome and introduce Congressman Thompson. Give him a hand.
Good morning. Good morning. The debate will go on. I hope you understand what I'm talking about tomorrow. All right. I want to thank all of you for being here. I want to thank the team of Hill staff, the PR folk, the marketing people who put the organizational framework for this event together. As you know, we try at every event to recognize the new people who are coming forward. And part of what coming forward is recognizing that there's a new leadership class. And that new leadership class need to be involved in those things that we're doing. So you're here by invitation, by just coming in. There's no admission or anything like that. We're glad to have you. The Congressional Black Caucus clearly has been called the conscience of Congress, and we do what we do because nobody else will do it. Fortunately, we need some help, and you are part of that help. 3 of us are full committee chairmen, John Conyers, Charlie Rangel, and myself. Every day, I have to defend my credentials before my colleagues. It doesn't matter that I'm faster than a speeding bullet. It doesn't matter that I can leap buildings in a single bound. It doesn't matter that I'm faster than a locomotive. I still have to defend my chairmanship every day. But you know, when you've been out here for a few years, the defense is something you get accustomed to. And so you just continue to move forward in that vein. 17 of our colleagues in the Congressional Black Caucus are subcommittee chairmen. So we make a difference. And now what you see is the landscape changing. The demographics have gotten a little grayer. Hello? You do understand, you mix white and black, you get gray. So that means that as chairman of my committee, there are more people who show up who are gray than it used to be. And that's because, to come to my conversation, you have to talk SWAC football or MEAC basketball or CIAA something, whatever. But you have to have a different conversation. And so that's getting to know who the new players are. So part of this sea change that's been occurring for the last 2 years is continuing. And I applaud the group for putting it together. And I look forward to a healthy discussion. Our groups that have been sponsoring us have been very supportive. You'll meet all of them a little later. But I'm pleased to introduce today's moderator, Mr. Jeff Johnson. Jeff? Oh, okay. Jeff serves as a senior advisor for media and youth outreach for the people of the American Way and serves as national director of the Youth and College Division of the NAACP. Brother Johnson has published numerous social and political commentaries for CNN.com, TheRoot.com, and BlackPoliticsOnTheWeb.com, and is a source of information quoted in Newsweek and Boston Globe. Brother Johnson currently contributes commentary and analysis about issues related to race, politics, popular culture, and socioeconomics for news broadcasts such as MSNBC, CNN, Fox News Channel, XM Radio, Sirius Satellite Radio, BET News, and the Dr. Field Show. Hello, Brother Johnson.
Thank you, Congressman. Good morning.
Good morning.
That requires a response. Good morning. Thank you very much. It's an honor and privilege to be here, to the Congressman, to Impact, to all of our sponsors, and to you that found it not robbery to fill this room. We hope that over the brief amount of time that we have available to us, that we will deal very substantively with the evolution of politics and empowerment. I'm hoping that this panel, and I know everyone on the panel, will lead us in a provocative discussion. I, for one, am leery oftentimes about even coming to panels anymore because we have the same conversations and we do the same stuff. And so I'm hoping that our panel will be provocative enough to provide us with not only their ability to pontificate on the problem, but they will be able to create and recommend some sophisticated solutions that will guide us as we leave not only this legislative conference, but go back to our communities where so many of us are responsible for providing a level of leadership. So it is a privilege, to introduce the other members of the panel. In no particular order, the Honorable Alicia Thomas Morgan, featured in Ebony Magazine as one of the nation's 30 leaders who are under 30, and named as one of Georgia's brightest 40 under 40. She has consistently, in the House of Representatives for Cobb County, been one of the voices of change, not just with her mouth, but with her actions. She was trained and came up through the NAACP and has been one that has been active and consistent in providing leadership, not only in Georgia, but around the country. The Honorable Isidore Hall, former Councilman Hall, was elected to the Compton City Council on April 15, 2003, as a representative of the 4th District. The citizens of Compton re-elected him to the position in April 2007, but he was most recently elected to the California State Assembly, where he had an extremely grueling race that he came out on, not because he's got such a great suit on, but because he is one of those soldiers in the trenches that believes that being a legislator is still important. Mr. Jamal Simmons is a well-known political analyst and frequent television commentator. He was regularly seen supporting Barack Obama for the Democratic nomination on CNN and MSNBC during the 2008 presidential primaries and caucuses. The night Obama won the Democratic nomination, CNN, with Simmons as a part of the team, won the highest ratings among every cable and broadcast network, with an extensive background in Democratic politics and international affairs. His views and opinions have been featured in major publications such as GQ, the New York Times, International Herald, and USA Today. Ms. Sophia Nelson has worked in the Republican Party since she was 20 years old. She served as a legislative policy analyst in the New Jersey legislature in 1990 as a special assistant to the Office of the Business Ombudsman during the administration of Governor Christine Todd Whitman. She also has experience in the United States Congress, serving as an investigative counsel to majority staff of the House Government Reform Committee's campaign finance investigation in the late 1990s. Additionally, she was Director of Congressional and Public Affairs for the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. She has worked on several national campaigns for Republican candidates, including George H.W. Bush in 1992 and George W. Bush in 2000 and 2004. In 1996, she became the youngest and the first black female in the state of New Jersey to receive a major political party's nomination for the U.S. Congress. As a black female Republican in New Jersey's 1st congressional district, her candidacy was widely watched at the national and state level. And last but certainly not least, we have L. Londell McMillan, who is an amazing entertainment attorney who has been in the trenches for a number of years, who is that shadow behind a lot of folks who are in office, and is one of the most recent owners of The Source magazine. Please, you all, one more round of applause for our entire panel. I want to get right into this. I mean, I think as the congressman said, the debate is on, but the debate is clearly raging. And as Congress is contemplating bailing out more money than we have to spend, we as regular folks continue to deal with not being able to buy bread and gas and send our kids to effective schools. And so with so many issues facing the nation, how do we advance the black agenda and what should be included? I hope that we're able to deal and dive into the breadth and depth of many of these questions. But even as we do that, and I want to throw this out first to Representative Hall, we hear and will hear over the next few days the notion of a black agenda. And I'm confused, forgive me. Who created this agenda? Who validated it? And who exactly is it for? Sir.
I was watching CNN the other day where they had the various Secretary of States dialoguing. And the question was asked, would it be great to have an African-American president? And Colin Powell said, first of all, he's an American. And the agenda must be an American agenda, an agenda that presents equal rights, an agenda that forges an opportunity for economic development and prosperity. I believe the black agenda, the way it's framed today, is limiting because it does not allow for inclusion of the American dream and the American perspective. As long as we're talking about a black agenda, if it does not mean economic development, if it does not mean empowerment, if it does not mean activism, it's just an agenda going nowhere fast. I think if there is an black agenda, an African-American agenda, absent of those things, it's just an agenda going nowhere fast. It's not an agenda, in my opinion, that leads to social matriculation, educational matriculation, economic matriculation. It's just an agenda that's out there where dialogue is taking place, but nothing outside of dialogue. And when we move beyond dialogue, then you begin to see an agenda that includes everyone.
Sophia, I want you to come in on this. How do we begin to even create some kind of meat around what that kind of agenda looks like, even comprehensively?
Well, I think I have two concerns about what I've seen in this campaign so far relative to an African-American black agenda. First one is I think for Senator Obama, he has a difficult line to walk. I mean, I think what Colin Powell said is real, that he is an American, speaking of Senator Obama, first and foremost. But he's got a delicate balance, because if you've read a lot of the commentary and the articles, everyone says he's a post-racial candidate, right? He's supposed to transcend race in some kind of way, because he has to be able to attract the support of white working-class voters, while at the same time keeping the African-American community, his base, I don't want to say the word happy, but he has to keep his base excited, and it's a fine line for him to walk. And if you notice, Jeff, Senator Obama has not spoken a lot in this election about African-American issues. In fact, they really haven't been on the table, and I think that's somewhat purposeful. So to answer the question about a black agenda, I'm in agreement with Isidore that I think what we have to do is have an American agenda that includes African Americans in a way that is significant somehow without putting that out there. And that's a very difficult fine line to walk, because then what I've heard a lot of white commentators, and I heard President Carter and Ted Kennedy and some others say this during the Democrat convention, that if Barack Obama is elected, they feel the race problem will be solved in America. There are people that really believe that once we have a black president, all black issues kind of come off the table.
But let me interject here, because I think that a lot of that comes from what has even happened in the first two answers on this panel, which is couching what black America needs within the context of the presidential campaign. Now, what black America needs is going to go far beyond what happens on November 4th, and is going to be affected by much more than who is inaugurated in January. And so, Alicia, I want you to come in here. How do we begin to take this conversation a little bit deeper? Because historically, what I've remembered is that the black agenda was set by people on the ground, not people in the clouds.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jeff. I want to, first of all, thank you all for being here this morning and for participating in this conversation. I want to respectfully disagree with both of my co-panelists here. I think it is critical for us to have a black agenda. If it wasn't, we wouldn't see the disparities that we see in public education in terms of the achievement or opportunity gap, however you choose to look at it. We wouldn't see the disparities in health, in wealth. We wouldn't see it in the criminal justice system. And so there has to be a black agenda. And we certainly cannot put it in the context of the presidential election, because Barack Obama is not running to be the president of black America. He's trying to represent all of America. And it's our jobs, I think, in terms of our civil rights organizations, our economic justice organizations, all of us have a role to play. And so while Barack Obama runs for president of the United States of America, we have a critical role. When Congressman Thompson came up here and said that as chairman of one of the most powerful committees in Congress, he still, on a daily basis, has to defend who he is, it is critical to have a black agenda. And so to get to the second part of your question, who's creating it? Obviously not the right people. I think the problem that we're facing when you expect for elected officials or some of these folks who were unnecessarily putting on pedestals, those people tend to be, and there are a few of us who are not, but they tend to be disconnected from the grassroots, just everyday regular folks. And if anything, what's important about this presidential election is to engage these people on November 5th, and to make sure that this excitement and this engagement continues, so that there is a black agenda that comes from the black community and addresses specifically those issues that I mentioned.
Jamal, let me come to you with this, because I think that what I'm still hearing is not the complexity of who the black community is. So as you start talking about this agenda, are we talking about black Republicans? Are we talking about black Democrats? Are we talking about poor black folks? Are we talking about rich black folks? Please.
This actually gets to the point that I wanted to make. You know, we talk about black politics really in a framework that's maybe about 30 years old, 40 years old. As a political professional, you know, we look very concretely at who are we trying to affect, who can we get to come out on Tuesday, what do they need to know, and when do they need to know it to get them to move. And the reality is that right now, there is not, I would argue, a black community. There are black communities, and they're very different. What you need in the Delta in Arkansas may be very different than what you need in the central part of Detroit, where I grew up, or in Bloomfield Hills, Michigan, or in Arlington, Virginia, where a lot of African Americans are starting to spread out, or Prince George's County, where a lot of African Americans are starting to spread out and go into their own communities as they make more money and they move along in the process. You're from New Jersey. One of the things we figured out in the Corzine campaign when he ran for governor the first time is actually I think it was when he ran for the Senate. There are, in New Jersey in particular, we figured out there are more African Americans who now live in non-majority African American precincts than live in majority African American precincts in the state of New Jersey. So that means you can go someplace like Newark and you'll find a big pot of African American voters. But that is not the majority of African American people that live in the state of New Jersey. So for the Democratic Party or for any politician who wants to talk to these voters, that means you have to start going into places where you would not traditionally look for black people. You start moving into suburbs, you start going out a little further away from the cities, and the issues of those people are going to be very different than the issues of the people who live inside the city. So if you're someone like a Barack Obama who's running for president, we just said this, but Barack Obama's not running, he is not a black political leader. Barack Obama is an American political leader who is black. And there is a difference that I think we have to be conscious of. It doesn't mean he doesn't care about black people, but it means as a community, we have to apply the same pressure on Barack Obama that every other community is applying on him, because if we don't, he's going to be responsive to the wheel that squeaks, like most other politicians. Like most other politicians. And so keeping that in mind, we as a community developing an agenda, we have to think about who it is that we're representing, whether or not every black political person has to try to represent every single other black person in the country at every single moment. And that may not always be true, and I would argue that it's getting to be more and more difficult for any one black political leader to represent all black people at the same time.
Well, and let me ask this, because and before I do that, we have some special guests. I'm going to need some help from you all out here. If you can do the best you can to move to the center. We've got 50 young people from Benford Middle School in Richmond, Virginia, who are joining us, and we're glad that they're joining us. So if we can move toward the middle as much as possible so that they can get some seats, that would be fantastic. Thank you in advance for your assistance. Wonderful. You can tell people to go to church. Jamal, you started to talk a little bit about this whole notion of diversity. And are there, I mean, we all saw your network, CNN, do this amazingly groundbreaking program, Being Black in America. And there were those that loved it, there were those that didn't love it, but clearly it was not made for black folks. Clearly this was a picture of this was a museum exhibit of black people for non-black folks and black people who are confused. And there were a number of issues that were brought out in this presentation that some could say are universally black. Are there any issues still in the landscape that no matter what your political leaning, no matter what your socioeconomic status, are uniquely black? And how do we begin to create bipartisan and multi-socioeconomic level coalitions to deal with those issues, even with some of those traditional kind of models of organization? Londell.
First, I want to just thank everybody for being here, and I thank all of you who came out, and the young people who are coming in the room. Greetings and thank you for coming. It's always a pleasure. Let's give them a hand. As the only one, I think, on the panel that doesn't make my living from politics, please excuse me. No. I thought you were in government. No.
Yeah, you missed the joke.
Oh, okay. Please excuse me for not being politically correct, because I just speak my mind, and I enjoy doing that, and I don't have to be politically correct. I make my living as a practicing lawyer and an entrepreneur. I happen to have spent most of my time in the world of culture, arts, media, and entertainment. So we represent clients that are both media institutions as well as individual artists, writers, creators. Many of them you know. You can look in the bio to see some of them. I recently just purchased The Source as an answer to his question because I'm a product. I'm probably on the elder end of this hip-hop generation, but I'm a product of the founding generation of hip-hop that both is inspired by part of it and embarrassed by part of it. And because of that, and because of my ability to be a change agent, it was important for me to get involved and try and to empower it and bring some responsibility to it. And consequently, I acquired with the Black Enterprise Greenwich Street, The Source magazine. And before The Source, there were many other publications that dealt with issues that were distinctively black. So when you think about what are distinctively black issues, our history is distinctively, it's black. It's a black history that serves as a very important piece of the foundation of this country. Our culture is very distinctively black. The challenges of underemployment, discrimination, aspiration, and lack of economic equal opportunity is a distinctively black problem. So the fact that our language as a people from Africa and other parts of the diaspora has been taken away from us is distinctively a black issue. So I say that as a foundation for the point that, you know, I've heard all of my panelists speak, and I actually almost agree with all of them, which is part of the reason why we're in, I think, the position that we're in. And as a lawyer who's a business lawyer, I think we're at a point where we need to do, by analogy, a merger and acquisition or consolidation of all of these things together as one people, and not seek to find disagreement in each other, but to refine and clarify what we're saying and find a language where we can have an agreement. So what do I mean by that? If someone says, well, Barack is not a black candidate, he's an American candidate that happens to be black, we could say it, or, you know, in hip hop, we can spit it or rhyme it in different ways, but, you know, to many people, we're still getting the same thing, depending on where you come from. But the point that's being made is that they're both correct and we need to merge. We need an American game plan for our national interests, and I believe we need a black American game plan for our special interests. Every other community has it. So, Jeff, I'm going to close by saying that we have to obviously organize, as everyone else says, and always agree. But what does that mean? We have to find a way to agree. And in any merger and acquisition or consolidation, whether it's business or in any organization, public interest, commerce, you find out what is the objective, what is the goal. And that's one of the better things about business and profit. There's a definitive, distinct goal. What is the goal and how do we agree to get there? What is the term of the agreement? What are the conditions of the agreement? What it means when you breach the agreement? And then we as a community, it's time to come to agreement on some things as opposed to just having our own uniqueness all the time. So let's agree on some things and still be unique in our own respects, because then we can get farther. Otherwise, we're just unique individuals spinning around, being creative and being fly, but we're not making productivity happen.
Sophia, before I come to you, I want to couch this, and I want you to have your own remarks, and then I want to come to the congressman. But I think Londell makes some good points there, but the question is, what is the mechanism for doing that? I mean, I don't think that there has been, in many cases, that kind of collective, community-wide, multi-level, multi-layered meeting since the Gary, Indiana Convention in 1972. I mean, where we had politicians, labor folks, artists, and the rest all coming to one place. And is that even realistic in 2008 to think that that can happen?
First answer to your question, yes, there is absolutely a uniquely black experience in this country. Everybody on this panel, you can tell we're very different. We have different backgrounds. We may have different political affiliations. But every one of us, if we had the time, could sit here and share stories relating exactly to what Chairman Thompson has said, that he has to defend his position every day. I worked on the Hill. I see it, I understand it, I live it as a black attorney. And so there are experiences that all of us have here, no matter what our age generation is, whatever, that because we're black in this country, we face certain things and we have to deal with certain things. And I think that the mechanism for change has to be a diverse one. What do I mean by that? I think if we were to go back to my parents' generation and they're baby boomers, they grew up in the civil rights era, there was a different modus operandi, if you will. They had to march, they had to be provocative, they had to do certain things to even get the attention and to shame America, if you will, into looking at its horrible treatment of black people in this country. Whereas our generation, I'm an Xer, there are a lot of Gen Y in here, I think, but if you look at the differences in how the generations have approached this, Barack Obama, and I want to disagree, I mean, yes, he is an American candidate, but he's still a black man in America, and I think it brings with that some very unique things that I expect him as a black woman to address. We're Americans, but he still has to deal with the black piece. I also want to say to my soror here that I absolutely agree with you that we do need a black agenda. I wasn't at all saying, I just wanted you to know that I think we need one. I'm just saying it may be a little different about how we go about enacting that or realizing it. Now, to your point, Jeff, and then I'll let someone else talk here, that when you look at, for example, what if John McCain wins this election? I mean, has anybody really thought about that? Because he may win this election. Now, I'm saying that as a lifelong Republican who grew up in the northeastern wing of the party. Christy Whitman is by no means a conservative. Those are the people that I'm definitely a moderate, what they call one of those swing, Northern Virginia Republicans, and I voted for Barack in the primary. I'm on the fence a little bit now. I actually like Sarah Palin, but for different reasons. I knew that would get a reaction, but I do.
But do you want her to be vice president?
Well, and that's another question we can answer, but let me get to the point of how we deal with this, because I brought this out.
Okay.
Brothers and sisters, I brought this out for a reason. If John McCain becomes president of the United States, we still have a black agenda that needs to move forward. The problem with that is there were 36 black delegates at the Republican National Convention. I wasn't one of them. So, having said that, there's a real problem here now. If McCain becomes president and the Republicans retain control, we don't have a voice really in that administration of that party. And that's the kind of thing, Jeff, that I want to see us do better at. Get past the whether I agree with everything you have to say or what you do, and get down to, as the brother here said, we have to have a goal. How are we going to put more economic empowerment in the hands of African Americans? How are we going to stop this foreclosure crisis, which is hitting us disproportionately? Unemployment hits us disproportionately. If the country fails, and I'll let the congressman speak to this, if we don't do some type of plan, if this thing turns into from a recession to a depression, we're going to get hit twice as hard as the rest of the country does. So I would just say we need a diverse plan to deal with whatever the issues are, and that includes Republicans and independents and everybody else. That's my answer.
All right, but before we come in, Congressman, we got to go back to church. If there is an empty seat next to you, could you please raise your hand? If you are standing, could you please sit next to somebody with a raised hand? The fire marshal is going to come in here in a minute and shut us down.
Hey, Jeff, you really
we
go to church.
We got more people than the club.
Jeff, you really go to church.
Every now and again.
Reverend.
Really do it.
All right, you all. Thank you.
The plate will be passed.
Congressman, I think we've begun to dive into this whole notion of pulling some things together and being challenged with some of the generational divides. I mean, the New York Times recently did an article on the new black politics and targeted folks like Governor Patterson, targeted folks like, it really took a look in my mind at this new generation of young legislators and new mayors and new governors, and tried to create a dichotomy between them and folks that had been in office before them. Is there really a difference in what these legislators want versus just a difference in the methodology?
I don't think there is, but let me lay out something very, very quickly for the audience. Probably the most difficult issue to discuss in any setting is race. It makes most individuals very uncomfortable. I see it every day. On the bailout situation, when this administration came up to the Hill with 3 sheets of paper asking for $700 billion,
and no
we
oversight.
said, well, you know, I can't go to the bank and ask for $500 and not have to fill out 10 sheets of paper.
That's right.
So the question is fairness and whether or not you're looking at it in its broadest sense. When you look at all of the socioeconomic demographics, we're at the bottom. So whoever is representing us ought to have some plan for getting that statistic off the bottom. Now, whether that becomes the black agenda or whatever, nonetheless, it's a statistics that we all are not proud of. And so for a lot of us, we raise that issue in every piece of legislation to come forward because we really want to get everybody off the bottom. And that's not being too black, that's not being a separatist, that's being someone who understands the reality of this country. Now, some people deal with it differently, but unless you have some people who elevate the issue so that it becomes a part of the debate, then so many people will be absent and hurt because of that. So there's a place for all of us. When I see the New York Times and other instruments trying to divide the black community by deciding who the next group of leaders happen to be, I say, well, I look at who's writing the article, look at who owns the paper. So it's in their best interest to divide the black community so that we can't ever pull together what's in our own best interest. So hopefully what we can see going forward is candidates who are sensitive to those statistics and work toward them. Now, it's not a quota, it's not a set-aside, it's a recognition that we have to fix it. And how we fix it is probably the greatest challenge. I love companies that come to my office and have to justify their past actions. You understand? Because now as Homeland Security Director, I'm working and interfacing as chair with all those individuals. And so I can ask the tough questions. Do you hire black people? Come on. I mean, you know, and then they said, oh, yeah. I said, where are they? And, you know, see, it's that, but it's a discomfort because then I get labeled, work as hard as anyone else. But you have to raise a question. And Jeff, you know, we are raising it with the media now because you see more and more people of color on TV now because we sit down with Fox, we sit down with CNN, and said, where are the black people? So we got folk on the air now. But if you don't raise the question, people will assume that everything's all right. And so you raise it in that spirit, but we all have a part to play. And some people can do it better than others. But the other question is when they say, well, I can't find anybody qualified. See, the question is for us to be qualified. So when that comes up, we say, I'm glad you asked that. So you can go down the road to Hampton. You can go across town to Howard and find qualified. And that's part of what we have to have because you just can't say, I'm in this situation because I'm black. So you have to get prepared. And that's the challenge for all of us. And I would hope as emerging leaders, you understand that challenge and you prepare for it. And so when that opportunity presents itself, you can step forward.
Well, and let me interject there, Congressman, because I think that I agree, and I want to play devil's advocate here, because a lot of times when that opportunity presents itself, that's when there becomes beef. And so for emerging leaders, there are opportunities when they emerge that those who have been there don't want them emerging. And so how do we begin? And that happens in halls of legislature, that happens on the block with grassroots organizations, it happens in media, it happens in business, it happens all over the place. So how can we internally begin to criticize the New York Times for creating a division that we in fact perpetuate? And how to be more productive?
Sure. Well,
how do we begin to create real bridges between the generations so that elders understand that it's not how long you've been there, but who you prepare to come next?
Well, and you're absolutely correct. And there's more of the problem to go around, so that if we find people committed to the solution, it's people like myself and others who need to open up the door for young people to come. And some of us are committed to that. I brag on my staff here in Congress. I have the most diverse and youngest staff of any committee on the Hill. I will put their talent pool up against it, but I understand my burden. I could say you haven't paid your dues, that you hear a lot of times. But if I don't open up and create opportunities as a committee of one so that the opportunities come, then I fail the test. And that's what every other person who's in a position to make a difference ought to do. And not be accustomed to taking on the character of the institution you work with. Because at some point, you're going to have to go to church with some folk, or you might live in the neighborhood with some folk that might not look like the folk you work with. So I think that's the good. Our challenge is how do we broaden the pool? Because many of those societal barriers will just accept one, and that becomes the norm. The question is, if you are the one, then you ought not be satisfied with being the one. You ought to reach back and pick up some others to come with you. And that is a struggle. And I know for young emerging leaders, it's a challenge for you. But there's commitment. Last point. Civil rights absolutely had its place. Had it not been for the Voting Rights Act, civil rights legislation, people who marched, did a lot of things, we wouldn't be having this intelligent discussion today. So that wherever you are, don't put that process down. Right. It's an evolution of what has transpired. Now the question is, going forward, can we move to the next level? And I think part of moving to the next level is understanding how you got there. And if you do, then I think we all can move forward.
Alicia, let me come to you on this, because I think, and let me say this, for all of the time that I've known Congressman Thompson, he's been one of those that has created opportunity. But there's so many that don't. And I don't want to delve in the mud, but I want to begin to create some models for folks. Alicia, how did you in particular, because you came up through the NAACP, so you paid your dues in a state, you went to the school in that state, you served on the ground, these folks know who you were, they supported you, they used you as a pit bull sometimes for some of the legislation that he wanted to get done, and then when it came time to run, they were like, who are you? What were some of the models that you used, and what would be some recommendations that you can give other emerging leaders for strategies on how to deal with that, how to be able to embrace elders, and how to be able to kick old people to the curb?
You know, Jeff, I want to refer back to a speech that you gave about 3 or 4 years ago, where I like to make a distinction between the elders and the old folks. And in Georgia, I'm originally from Florida, and so I started NAACP when I was 14. And I have to give credit to the NAACP because that is where I was trained and learned and developed the audacity to run, to serve in the community, and to not look to young people as having to wait their turn. But instead, the young people were equal to adults and had the same abilities to organize and work it out. And so with that tradition behind me, when I started to run, of course, there were those who were just haters. You know, it's not possible, and particularly because I was running in Cobb County, and this is a place, Newt Gingrich and Bob Barr representing Cobb County in Congress. So when you tell somebody as a black woman that you're going to run for state representative, that was, impossible in their minds. So many of the haters would tell me, I was 22 at the time. And so I was elected at 22 and sworn in at 23. So yes, there were people who, in many ways, stood in the way. I remember getting the calls. This isn't possible. You need to, drop out of the race. You haven't paid your dues. What makes you think you could be a state legislator? Forget about my 10 years of NAACP experience, and more important, or as important than that, working in my district and working in the community and understanding the issues that we were dealing with. But I have to say, those were the old folks. But there were some elders, and one is sitting in the back of the room, Deanne Bonner. She's president of the NAACP in Cobb. But there were folks like Dr. Lowry, who wrote me a $1,000 check. Wasn't a $25 check and patted me on the head and said, oh, that's cute, but who believed in me. And so those were the folks that I got, in my kitchen cabinet and leaned on them for their advice and their wisdom, but also brought them along with me in terms of this struggle and what we were to do. And so what have I learned? What am I doing now? I am learning from those challenges that I had to deal with. So rather than telling young people, pay your dues, or let me be the only one, let me be the youngest, I now have my campaign manager who will now be in the legislature. He's now going to be the youngest. But creating leadership programs in my district, training young people in high school right now so that when it's time for me to leave that seat, not at 65 or 80, but when I'm ready in the next few years, that somebody is trained and ready. We don't do a good enough job in our community in terms of succession planning. Who's coming after us? What are you training? What is the information that you're sharing with folks? And so that is, I believe, part of what my legacy will be, yes, at 30-something years old when I leave the legislature, because this is not about me or the piece that I have created, but it is about how do we better this community and how can I bring other folks in this fold, because quite frankly, I can't do it alone. And so I say to the old folks who, now all of a sudden that I got this REP in front of my name, things are a little different, and I, bring them along too, but I say to them that I'm not going to allow the haters and the naysayers to tell me that it's impossible, but in fact that it is possible, and more of us need to do it.
Isadora, let me get you in on this, and then Jamal, I'll come to you. I want to build on what Alicia's talking about, because from a recommendation and solution standpoint, we see many other communities that create training institutions that prepare their young people to run for office. So whether it's expunging misdemeanors or teaching them how to speak or whatever it is, because white kids go to jail too. How do we begin to institutionalize the development of young politicians that's disconnected from the party but's connected to the community?
Good question. First of all, I agree that we have to do more in the African American community of training, energizing, developing young minds to take role in the community in terms of leadership. For instance, in my district, I tell people all the time, particularly emerging leaders, and by the way, emerging leaders must stop asking for permission to move up. Yes. Don't ask permission. Make your way. For so long, Jeff, and then I'll get to your question. For so long, we're accustomed to having someone tell us, "Now you're ready, now you're ready, now you're ready," and then 30 years will pass by. That person will be long gone, and they've not prepared anybody to take that seat. Stop asking for permission. Just make your way and do what you got to do. When I was served on the school board, I asked many people to endorse me on the school board. No one endorsed me. Congresswoman Juanita Melinda McDonald was the only one to say, I will support you. Couldn't fundraise. I have a real estate company, put $50,000 into my own race, won. Became president, the youngest elected president of the school district. Then I decided to run for the city council, and I asked everyone to support me. Oh, it's not your time. Just hold on. Oh, you're running against this guy. This guy is a giant. I said, well, hell, David took down Goliath. And so I made my way. Then for the state assembly, people were saying, well, you shouldn't do this. We have this seat pegged for somebody else. Says who? Since when did we have to succumb to someone else's belief that someone else is better than you? Make your own way. Stop asking for permission. But then began to develop an institution by which you can create better minds. It's okay to know that there's other people in your community that can do a job much better than you. Empower young minds to become greater than you. I don't want anybody sitting next to me that doesn't think greater than I think. I don't want younger people sitting next to me that can't achieve greater goals than I can achieve. And then when you get to, and this is the answer, when you get to a position of power, find funding mechanisms and sources to create an opportunity to develop young minds, leadership institutions, political institutions, social advocacy programs, things of that sort, whereby young people in the community can have a mechanism to develop their minds, to prepare them for higher office, for entrepreneurship, for opportunities to reach out and make a difference in their community.